I grew up in a wonderful neighborhood. I didn't know it at the time, but I was raised by a pair of the Greatest Generation and a neighborhood full of, members of the Greatest Generation. My dad was a serviceman in World War II. He was an infantryman. He was in the 94th Infantry Division, Patton's Third Army. He got a Silver Star, but like so many, he came back in 1945, was immediately discharged, and rejoined the civilian workforce. So aside from knowing that there were some medals and an old uniform up in the attic, we really had no military kind of background. So my journey towards the Air Force Academy probably started by rights in the summer of 1969. I was a Boy Scout, and most troops on the East Coast at least would make a pilgrimage at some point during your scouting career out to a place called Philmont, New Mexico. And so for a troop in the Baltimore region, you'd fly out to Denver. That was exciting in its own right. You'd then take a bus from there down to Cimarron, New Mexico, and you'd stop a time or two along the way. And it just turns out that on some glorious July day, we all stopped at the Air Force Academy. And I just thought, this is a special place. And then standing there and looking east, out across the Black Forest, and you could probably see Kansas in those days, it just seemed like that this was a place which would inspire the imagination, perhaps challenge the soul. So I think the first thing that I was taken aback by at the Academy in the most pleasant way was the enormous talent that shows up at the institution. And so you feel both challenged and privileged to be in their company. But it became very clear to me that this really talented group of people, not least of which the staff, the faculty and staff, as talented as they were, spent all of their time trying to help you, trying to invest in you, to try to make you something better than what you showed up as. That was ennobling and empowering at once. And when you then thought about the possibility you might then matter beyond your own capabilities, it was very attractive. I think 80% of the classes in those days were going to pilot training. And so you were incentivized to think about being a pilot. So I naturally thought the same way, that I showed up to be not just a professional military officer to serve my nation, but to do so as a pilot. I played lacrosse, and I had an injury playing lacrosse that did some damage to the ligaments and the tendons that hold your spine in place. And within a fairly short period of time, while at the academy, my spine went from being straight, 0 degrees curvature to 63 degrees curvature in the spring of my second year. They evaluated me and quickly determined that the only way to stop the progression was to essentially fuse the spine. I missed that entire summer being out in various medical facilities. When I got back to the academy for the start of school in the fall of 1974. They entered me into classes as if nothing had happened, and from the academy's perspective, just treated me as if I was just another one of the 4,500 cadets. That was very, very important to me because I felt like I belonged and I felt like I was respected as a member of the larger wing. And so I sought out the opportunity to become a pilot, and again, I was pleasantly surprised. Everybody I met said, "That's what you want to do? There's no reason why we shouldn't at least consider the question." I graduated on the 2nd of June, 1976, and later that day I got a call from Washington that said that the Surgeon General of the Air Force has just signed your waiver to go to pilot training. Unfortunately for me, I'd already agreed to go to grad school, so I held that off for a year. But I went from the academy that day knowing that I was going to go to pilot training. I was enormously grateful at the time. It was a privilege, a gift, more than something that I thought I was entitled to. And it had an enduring effect on me in terms of how I think about then my further possibilities and what you have to do to perhaps treat others the same way. Went to pilot training at Williams Air Force Base. You learn to fly in blue sky, fair weather, not many clouds out there. It was as challenging a thing as I'd ever done. And so that was, for me, a formative experience of trying to think at the speed of something that would not stop or slow down or wait for me. And I loved it. As stressful as it was, I just loved it. Coming out of that, I was selected as a FAPE, a First Assignment IP, back in the T-37, which I love, the T-37. It was, for me, like a biplane with jet engines. After the T-37, I had some difficulties with the spinal fusion. The doc stepped in and said that maybe the steel rod that's in your back should be removed so that it doesn't unnecessarily kind of inflame your fusion. So I went back into the hospital a month or so later, came out, steel rod removed, was cleared again for flight status, and I went to C-141s. Having a graduate degree in hand, I was expected to then apply that graduate degree in some way, shape, or form, and so that's what led me back to the Naval Academy. So my first 6 months at the Naval Academy trying to teach mechanical engineering, the stress and strain was how do I actually communicate that to students who come from a different background, might not have the same kind of foundations that I do, and in some cases might not be as interested in this material as I might hope that they are. So that was a great experience in terms of how do you communicate, possibly inspire, but at least educate. I'd had at that time the opportunity to earn a second master's degree in computer science. I had the first in mechanical engineering. I was looking for something that would give me an opportunity to combine all of the passions that I had developed up to that point in time. One of my mentors suggested maybe what you want to do is to split your time between the reserves, right, and then find a career in the civilian sector where you can do more. And so I then joined the reserves, where I continued to fly and to kind of progress along my Air Force career. And at the same time applied for and was accepted to the National Security Agency. The National Security Agency, which has always been a mix of audacity of trying to exceed the expectations of our adversaries, audacity in trying to make use of kind of cutting edge technology, and a public service role, which is to serve the nation, seemed like the perfect combination of all those for me. So the first 6 years of my NSA career were largely given over to activities of that sort. Very early in that stretch, I was given an opportunity to lead within NSA. Not surprisingly, one of the things I developed an appetite or a taste for at the Air Force Academy was seeking out opportunities where you could serve people through leadership. And so I began to kind of do that at the National Security Agency. And so at some point, about 23 or 4 years into that career, I was presented with the opportunity to become the Deputy Director of the National Security Agency. It was exciting and a moment of privilege on every day. And most days, I was not the senior member in the room. I might have on many of those days been the junior member in the room, but always felt like I was a part of a team that was worth being on. And ultimately, there's a great deal of professional satisfaction that comes from being able to make a contribution at a greater level, and being in the proximity of people that perhaps will challenge you and assist in your pushing yourself beyond that which you might have done just on your own merits. If you'd asked me in the late 80s or early 90s when I was pursuing my career at NSA, what does a person who's retired from NSA do? I don't know, math puzzles, you read a lot. I would never have imagined there was a life after. Now, this is an experience that is much sought after. It's a rich and vibrant area to be in. There's just an enormous potential, both positive and negative, associated with cyber, which lands me here at the U.S. Naval Academy, almost as the bookend to my career, teaching cyber science. And both the Air Force Academy and the Naval Academy have pursued accredited majors in cyber science. Both of them have been successful in that. They're 2 of only 4 in the nation that are currently accredited in cyber science. So if you want to know where the vanguard is for cyber science education, it's at the service academies. I have a brother who was a Naval Academy graduate, killed in service, flying an A-6 off the USS Eisenhower in 1983 alongside a Soviet task force. Had 2 roommates at the academy who died in military aircraft accidents. There isn't a day that goes by I don't think about those 3 people in my life and what they may have done or become. And while my efforts couldn't possibly accommodate or make up, right, for their loss, it is something that motivates and inspires me every day. And you therefore kind of think about that on this campus when you see the hopes, dreams, aspirations of all these kids. You want to keep them safe, but you want to equip them so that they can make their way through a dangerous world and make their lives count for something. So I have loved what I have done for the last 40 plus years. Each day being a little bit different, but all being of the same quality, which is get up in the morning and figure out how you can grow a little bit more, serve a little bit more, be in the proximity of others who inspire you a little bit more. And so I'll continue to look for that. I have to say how grateful I am to have a family that allows me to do that. Whether it's the family that bore and raised me, the siblings that encouraged me, or my wife and children who have sustained me, right, all through those years. And I realize that not every citizen of this planet is so fortunate, right? And so once again, just an enormous gratitude for all of that. In a world where there are many opportunities to celebrate this or that career, you have to just be grateful that you had the chance to pursue it in the first place. and that somebody chose to shine a light on it in a second. I can't tell you how grateful I am to the Air Force Academy for having accepted me in the first place, for having supported me when they really had no obligation to do so, right? When I was either not commissionable or certainly not waiverable for pilot training. For considering me as a member of the Long Blue Line simply for having shown up and meeting the minimum qualifications, and giving me an opportunity at every step of the way to essentially kind of step up and can you do something more, or will you do something more, right? And for all of those opportunities, all you can be is grateful, right? And have a sense that we really do live, right, in a terrific society which allows for that possibility. And the institution of the United States Air Force or the larger United States military is, I think, one of the best institutions to have essentially taken advantage of the best aspects of that.